Last week I played Armageddon Riders, a game that had its ups and downs, but was overall a pretty game. This week I pick up a game that I tried to play for a review a few months ago, got frustrated, and shelved it. I want to give it another actual try, and it's just as bad as I remembered it. That game is obviously Athena on the Nintendo ES. You play as Athena, and apparently she's bored in her castle. She ventures around and somehow ends up in some fantasy world where everything is out to kill her. She just wants to explore and find the obvious Lord of Evil that inhabits the realm. That's really all there is to the story. Now, I should have known that this game was going to jump straight off the edge by looking at the box. Japan's top arcade hit? Okay, maybe. I don't know what their arcade hits were at the time. But this yellow circle right here? From the creators of Ikari Warriors? Oh, good lord, we're effed. The game plays as a normal platformer, although with a lot of extra features that are somewhat uncommon for the time. Athena starts out fairly weak, but can obtain new weapons and armors as she defeats enemies and destroys rocks. She can also pick up special items that will increase her attack and defensive strength, which is pretty interesting. I'll give props to these parts of the game. But as you play the game, you'll also find so many other frustrating elements that will chase you away from ever becoming close to finishing the game. For one, I'm going to repeat what I just said a few seconds ago. Athena is freaking weak. For being a goddess, she's a freaking pushover. Sure, you can get armor that makes the game much more tolerable, but until then, if you're not careful, you can easily die against the first enemy you come across. There are no invulnerability frames, and one hit can wipe out half of your life bar. At first, I didn't even realize that the armor helped, so I was wondering why there was a life bar at all. But you need to get a full set of breastplate, shield, and helmet before you notice any difference within the damage that you take upon getting struck by an enemy. Oh, and the enemies also tend to juggle you around, so that's another thing you need to be wary about. But then again, even if you are trying to avoid enemy attacks, the hit detection of the game is incredibly shoddy. Sure, it works in your favor a lot of times, but then there are just other times where you're unsure how you took damage, especially in the underwater stage. It just felt completely random. The worst is when you're swinging your weapon. It's such an odd swing, and I can't really understand how it's supposed to work. Vertically? Swing horizontally? I don't know. That's not even mentioning your starting kick, where Athena throws her foot about an inch away from her body. Am I kicking these things? Or are they just jumping away? I think I'm kicking them. But it sucks that you can't break blocks with your kick, which is a huge problem in the underwater stage. I'll get to that level shortly. Let's talk about the weapons. You will probably first find a club, and then maybe a sword. Some of the weapons can be upgraded once, such as the club switching to a hammer, and then the blue sword going gold. I'm assuming it increases your attack power, allowing you to defeat enemies and bosses much quicker. Some weapons are better than others. The arrows, quite frankly, blow. You can only shoot one at a time, and enemies respawn fairly quickly. Even the upgraded arrows, although doing more damage, can only be fired at a slow rate. The only time I really found good use of the arrow was for the first boss and the underwater stage. The second stage you may find what looks to be a flail or something. This weapon demolishes everything in its path, whether it be enemies, rocks, or just in case I got that far, the second stage boss. Seriously, I was able to wipe it out in one hit. The problem I've noticed with this flail is, again, the hit detection. I felt like the flail often passed through some enemies until they got closer to me. So short or long range you were fine, but mid-range of the weapon it was completely ineffective. So let's move on to the third stage, which is the underwater level. Athena turns into a mermaid, and the game almost turns into a shooter. People complain about games like TMNT's swimming stages, but I promise you that it has nothing on Athena. Granted, I still think the Addams Family lake level was worse, but Athena's isn't great. Enemies still keep respawning, and the arrow is the only real weapon that's effective down here. You can still find items to break blocks, and Athena can get some sort of wave attack, but I found that this didn't kill squat. The level also feels a bit like a maze, and I ended up somehow kicked back to the start of the level. I did get to the boss once, but died because I got switched from being a mermaid back to human? The fuh? But that's not all. When I got kicked back because I hit the wrong exit or something, I sunk back into the water with the basic kick. A kick that was completely useless, and I'm not joking. I couldn't break any blocks or kill any enemies. Did the game glitch? I really don't know, but at this point is when I said, F it, I'm done. Granted, when I looked at the manual, it said that there was a necklace that turned Athena into a mermaid. But why should this be required? It's hidden on the left when you start the stage, and you have to break the blocks. If I only had the stupid kick, I wouldn't have been able to get far anyway. It's so stupid. I mentioned the bosses in short, but to elaborate, you really do need to have the best weapon to defeat it. I can't imagine trying to defeat the tree boss in the first level with anything but the bow. It flails around its roots and constantly flings apples or something at you. You seriously won't be able to get close. And I wasn't even sure I was hitting it. When firing arrows, they fall to the ground upon impact, and I wasn't sure if they were actually working until it blew up and got cut in half. It's just bad game development, in my worthless opinion. One of the stranger things I noticed about the game was the lack of music at the title screen. Odd, but I was fine with that. But then when I pressed start, it showed a strange intro of Athena entering a room and then the game fading to black when she gets to the middle of it. Even weirder. I thought maybe the game was incompatible with my Retron 5, so I booted up a ROM of it to see the same thing happen. But then when stage 1 started, good God, the music! It's enough to make your ears bleed. It's some of the worst music I've ever heard on the system. I thought surely it has to get better as the game moves on, but once again, we get to stage 3, the underwater level. It's freaking awful. It's atrocious. It's the reason mute buttons were invented. It freaking sucks. Finally, does the game require loading times? In 1987? When new stages load, the game screen goes black for a short time. What the hell is it loading? Athena is just a poor excuse for a game. I'll give it credit. The developers had some interesting ideas on ways to flesh out the typical platformer genre, but they were just badly implemented. Weapons should have felt a bit more useful and different amongst each other. Armor, although I'm glad it existed, shouldn't be 100% required to survive in the game. Again, I'm happy it exists, but it makes such a noticeable difference, and I wish you didn't die so easily without it. Because, you know, Athena is a freaking goddess! The enemies should have relaxed a bit in the respawning times. Yeah, Ninja Gaiden had respawning issues, but it's not the end of the world, because at least you know the enemy is there, and by moving just right, they will disappear. And here, they just keep coming. The music? I don't even know what to say about it, other than it being possibly worse than Streets of Crap 3. Streets of Rage 3. I mean, Rage. Not crap. Although the game sucked. The graphics are average for the time, so at least there's that. But even so, I do feel like this is one of the worst games I've ever played for the system. If you are looking for a new game to frustrate you to no end, give Athena a shot. Otherwise, let this goddess remain bored in her castle. It's better that way. Final score? 2 out of 7. This is Reaper. Happy fragging.